All right. Start off with, I would like to thank everyone for showing up today. Make sure you're in the right place. This is the Addressing Special Interest Group for Carolina URISA. And also, just to start off straight from the start, I would like to thank Robert Appleby with RGA for sponsoring us and supplying us with the Addressing Professional ribbons. And if you do not have one, let me know, raise your hand. We've got some extras up here that we can make sure if you need one. Oh, I'll hand them out. All right, the next thing we want to do is I'd like to have everyone that is part of your board. First off, I'll introduce myself. My name is Wayne Brewer. I've worked for the City of Raleigh for approximately 16 years doing addressing. I'm your board chair for the Addressing SIG. And then we also have a vice chair from North Carolina, one from South Carolina, and then we have our secretary, and then we also have a representative for our private sector. So if I could have, we'll start with Matt. If you could please stand up and just introduce yourself, or please you can come up here, whichever way you want to do this. All right, so basically what we're going to do today is this group is here for you because we saw a need for a group that is not represented well. So we wanted to make sure that we have one for addressing. It is a growing profession, and you cannot really do a whole lot of anything within your municipalities, within emergency services, within utility billing, issuing permits. You cannot do hardly anything without having an address. So we wanted to start bringing the addressing professionals together, and so you can meet each other, speak about what you do in your municipality or in your section of the world, and so let everyone learn from one another. And so this is going to be your group. It's not going to be just the people that just introduce themselves saying, this is what we're going to do. These are the things we're going to tell you. We want the ideas to come from the group. Whatever y'all would like to see happen or information on, that's what your leadership will go out and try to find and try to inform you about, or point you in the right direction, or say, we know that they're doing this in Myrtle Beach, so speak with this person. They might can help you out there. And I apologize, I'm going a little fast and everything. But what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask Miss Wells, Martha Wells, with Special Focus, to stand up and let us know some of the things that are going on out there with like the National Address Database and anything else that she would like to speak to as far as that goes. That's completely up to you.
All righty. Some of you were in the workshop we went through on addressing yesterday. I was glad to have everybody there and see you today. Addressing has, over the last probably 10 years, gone from sort of the invisible but absolutely critical and essential data set at the local level to having a lot of attention at the state and national level. And so our conversations have become rather different. Couple of things. Initially, the move to get visibility at higher governmental levels like the states and the federal level came because of the broadband initiative. Some of you are familiar with that. Federal government allocated a huge amount of money under the American Recovery Act, ARRA, in 2008 to help bring us out of recession and all of that, to making sure that every U.S. resident had the ability to get to broadband internet service. And they assumed that all the states had really nice, up-to-date, and complete address databases that could be then compared with the lists of customers of broadband providers and see whose addresses on that didn't match any known customers. And yeah, sure, there's some people who just don't want broadband access, but there's also people who can't get it. Well, the joke was kind of on the feds because the states didn't have those statewide address databases, and so they started working on frantically to collect them up from their cities and counties and That was the beginning of a high profile for addressing at the state level. Second thing that happened was the move by the emergency services community, your police, fire, and emergency medical people, toward Next Gen 911. And has anybody in this room not heard that term yet? Okay, you're all familiar with that. What's happening is we're moving out of the era of wired phones into the area of all cell phones, voice over internet, people who tweet, people who use various social media and text to report emergency incidents. And this is driving your public safety people crazy. And they now have to switch all of their hardware gear to a system that is optimized for wired phone lines, which now account in most places for less than 30% of their traffic in calls, to systems that are capable of handling everything, including images in text messages, pictures. Oh, I just saw this traffic accident. Here's the picture. Come and get the people, or come and get these cars off the freeway. Yeah, that's what they're going to have to deal with. And they're really working hard at it. But one of the things that they're going from is address ranges, the old MSAG type of addresses, to address points. And that's made addressing very, very visible and very important, again, at the local level. In the midst of all that, so that's got the states working away at it under their emergency services people, the emergency management agencies, all over the country. I mean, you're not North Carolina, South Carolina, that's no different. It's everywhere. Everybody is in this. And there are a lot of meetings going on. In the middle of that, there ought to be a long conversation at the federal level about creating a national address database. Well, if the states are all putting together these statewide ones, surely it would be very simple to take those statewide databases, roll them up to the federal level. Oh, there's only 51 of them, if you include the District of Columbia. It'll be wonderful. Well, there's since been a lot of discussion about, well, what is necessary in that federal database, because a lot of the local and state databases carry a whole lot of attributes about those addresses that are not really needed at the federal level. Federal needs are different. And Census, in fact, does have a national address database. It's called the Master Address File. It's linked inextricably with the Tiger files, which you all know and love. But there's a problem. Census can't share that file with anybody under Title 13 of the United States Code. And it will take a congressional action, and we all know how common those are these days, and have been for the last few years, to change that. And nobody's really willing to change it. It has to do what the Title 13 does. It says any information that might be personally revealing about anybody, any of us, is an invasion of personal privacy, and therefore cannot be released until 72 years after the date the census is taken. It's called the genealogy rule. And those of you who do family history know that, we're waiting now for 2022 because that's when the 1950 census will come out. It will have been 72 years. And the theory that was based on back in the day was that the average life expectancy was about 72 years, so that by the time your personal census information from the first census you were ever involved in appeared in public, you'd be dead. So it wouldn't really bother any living people. Now, the truth is, I could go back in 2012 and, look back at the 1940 census, and people that were still living are in it. Easily. People who are in their 80s and 90s. But that's not going to change. But there's conversation now to create this national address database. And I was in a meeting Tuesday in Washington, D.C. with representatives of about 15 different federal agencies ranging from the FBI, Social Security, Environmental Protection, Department of Education, FEMA, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, Interior. We've had military representatives there from various service agencies. It's pretty much, and the State Department, everybody. They all have needs in some ways for addressing, HUD. And they're talking about how to create this thing and how to make it accessible and useful to everybody. But we're talking based on what Census knows about addresses, there are about 140 million residential addresses in the United States, and an additional number, we're not quite sure, I haven't been able to pin that down yet, of non-residential, business and commercial addresses. And that doesn't include all the other buildings and things that have addresses in this country, such as churches, schools, government buildings, utility-type structures, et cetera, because they're not needed for the census. So we think there's probably about 200 million records that would wind up in this national address database if it's ever completed. And there's a lot of questions about, one, how do you go about building that? How do you go about maintaining it once you've got it built? There are roughly 35,000 units of local government that create and maintain addresses in this country, between the counties and the cities, tribal nations, other entities that do that. And if you have to go around, if somebody has to go around and say, okay, Sumter County, could we get an update on your data? And then we have to go over to City of Raleigh and say, could we have yours? And then we go to, San Francisco and get theirs, and Boston and all those little burgs in between. That's going to take a massive number of people and a massive number of hours, and it's going to be a burden to some degree on local government and state government to make that happen. And where's the funding for that? Where's the money for this? So it's an interesting conversation. It's partly driven by what's happening at the local and state level with NextGen 911. It's partly driven by things like broadband initiatives, various people. Oh, and the post office was there too. And they have a little bit of a stake in it. We haven't heard from IRS yet, but they also have a stake. They're just being fairly quiet about it at the moment. So, all these people, HUD, they care because they manage a lot of housing units, and they look at mortgage and foreclosures and redlining and those kind of things, and addresses matter to them. You think, what do the feds need addresses for? There's a lot of need out there for it. Education, where are the children that we are serving with public schools, and where are the children in private schools, and what's going on with that? These people all spoke very, very eloquently about their needs. But again, the question is, how do we put this together, and what needs to be in it? Obviously, an address number, a street name, a city or a place, a state, zip code. What else do you need in there to work with that? And there are standards out there. Some of you work with them. Some of you probably haven't heard of them. The national standard for addressing is the Federal Geographic Data Committee, or FGDC's United States Thoroughfare Landmark and Postal Address Data Standard. Okay? It will not tell you how to put your addresses on buildings, but will tell you how to manage them as data. NENA, which is the Emergency Number Association, has put out a standard for addresses within emergency call records. In other words, when you get a call to a 911 center, what address information goes into that record, and how is it parsed and held, again, as data. There are postal standards which have to do with the formatting of mail, how you put an address on a letter or a package that you're sending. So those are three big ones that are currently active. There are others. Some states have their own standards. There are some international standards. But again, that's a part of the conversation about developing a national address database. Is it's got to be standardized. And what does that reflect back on you guys, as if you're going to develop your addresses into a really robust and useful database, you probably want to think about using a standardized format for that stuff and naming your fields according to the standard, because then when your state comes knocking on your door and says you need to give us your data, you won't have a whole lot of reworking to do with your fields and all your way your data is set up to be able to generate that information the way they need it. We also, as a community, need to be working on what kind of tools do we need to accomplish those kinds of exchanges of data, not just with the states and the feds, but also with the communities around us for mutual aid reasons, for common cause across borders, for things like wildfires that pay no attention to boundaries, hurricanes and tornadoes that do that also. You know, they don't just stop at the county line and say, oh, I'm done now. They tend to keep going. And, you know, sometimes they go right across the line from South Carolina into North Carolina, or 3 or 4 states out west will be covered in one wildfire. And how do we exchange our information about those things? So those are some things to be thinking about. And I think this group can be fabulously helpful to one another and as a group to provide information to your North Carolina Council and to the feds as they go through this process. The other thing that's coming, and this is something that I can't stress enough, and I think Wayne and a couple others of you in the room who've been through this, 2018, Census will be sending a letter to every jurisdiction in the country asking them if they want to participate in the local update of census addresses, or LUCA program. Do it. Do it. Because what Census has in its database and what you have in your list of addresses for your community may be very different. When we did Wake and Raleigh, we did them together because that kind of worked out better. In 2008, running up to the 2010 census, we found 17,000 addresses that Census didn't know about. Be aware that Census commissioned a report about the value of having a person counted. KMPG, the Big 8 accounting firm, did that study for them in 2001 before 9/11. It was published in April of 2001. Said that the average amount of money that was handed over from the federal government on a per capita basis based on census numbers per year was $2,900 per person, or roughly $30,000 over a 10-year period. When you find 17,000 addresses, you can do the math. Census accepted over 15,000 of those as actual and put them into their database, which means that Raleigh's population count and Wake counties was essentially that many more people, because if Census doesn't have the address, they're not going to send a questionnaire there. They're not going to get any information back from those people, okay? Because they don't think they're there. So adding those up front makes a huge difference in how much money you get from the feds in the next 10 years. And you can't go back and change it once it's done. Okay, so you have one opportunity for this, and it's going to come in 2018. So start alerting your elected officials that you want to do this and you want to work with it and get it done, because it will pay off. It will pay off. And I know, you know, those of you who've been through it, it's a bit of a pain in the neck, but it's definitely worth doing. So that's something to think about, is that I was talking with the census guys at this meeting on Tuesday, and they said, let everybody know we've got the beta tools for the 2018 LUCA, and we're going to be sending it out sooner than you think, and tell people to get ready. So I promised I would do that for census. So that's something to know about. And if you have questions about that, I'll be around till about noon tomorrow, so just flag me down. But thanks for being here.
Before we move forward, Lisa has rejoined us, graced us with her presence. So just if we can have you introduce yourself, please. Thank you. All right. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to bring up to the group as far as things that happening statewide, be it South Carolina, North Carolina, federally, anything like that? Anyone else like to come up, say a word, anything like that? I say we got roughly about 5 minutes before our time is over. So what I want to remind everyone is the addressing SIG is part of Carolina URISA. We've kind of had a grace period here as we've tried to create the group and so forth. But in order to be part of the addressing SIG, you do have to be a member of Carolina URISA. So make sure that if you've not paid your dues and everything, make sure you take care of that. Does anyone know, Colleen, do you know if they've got a Carolina URISA group or booth upstairs? I'm sorry? Oh, yes. Is there one up? What is that? 9? Booth 9? All right, so go to booth 9. You can go ahead and take care of it today. And do not hold me to this, but it may be a tax write-off. So go right ahead. Or maybe your municipality will pay for it, but it's just $35 along in there, and then you can continue to be a member. And so, as I said before, this group is for you. So it's not for us to, the board, to decide what we're going to do. So I know we've only got, like I say, a couple minutes left, but if you have anything that you want to see the group, take on or find out about, you can email us. The information is on the Carolina URISA, board as far as the address, the email address, or like I say, stop one of the board members that you see, and let them know. We'll bring it all together, and then did we decide about a month that we were going to try to do a phone meeting with everyone? I think it was about a month. Everyone that's already members, you'll be getting an email. We're going to try to put together a phone conference for everyone and come back in a month and discuss some of the things that come out of this meeting as far as what you would like to hear about and so forth. So unless anyone's got anything else, I guess we will call it to an end and let you start heading towards your next group.